Hey everyone, I hope you're doing great and following the 3 H's of the channel. In this video, I have 4 encounters for you that all take place deep in the woods. If that sounds like something you're interested in, pull up a stump and let's get into it. Thank you for watching. I'm not usually the type of person to talk about this kind of thing, but something happened to me in 2021 and I need to get it out on the internet or something, because otherwise it's gonna be in my mind for even longer. I was on a road trip with my family to New York City. I'm from Virginia. This was to visit my aunt, who had just had a child. Through the trip, we stopped at this gas station in the little panhandle of West Virginia. This place was incredibly rural, and I was really jumpy and jittery being surrounded by trees. I just wasn't used to this. And no, I'm not a mutant who stays indoors all day. I live in the woods as well, but there was something about this place, about these woods, that made me feel like at any moment I was going to have something awful happen to me, and that I was just going to be surrounded by something. I don't know, it was a very strange feeling. It was pretty late because we had left at about 5 p.m. We decided to book a room at a nearby motel. We only had to get to New York City by the end of the week, and it was only Tuesday. I felt that anxiety leave me in the motel room, but it was replaced by this constant, intrusive thought. Not even an intrusive thought, more like an intrusive desire that something was calling me to go outside again and allow myself to be surrounded by the woods. I tried to go to sleep, but to no avail, because this thing just wouldn't go away, and I decided I was going to stand by the window, and that was it. I was not going outside. I stood up by the window to the room and looked out. I saw a guy poke his head out from a small convenience store right across the road before walking out kind of reluctantly and carefully. I kept watching him, trying to see what would happen, and he got to the edge of the street lamps when all of a sudden I can't describe it, like a soundless explosion. Nothing, it just happened. I know that I'm not schizo or going crazy because in the morning, cops were everywhere around investigating this pile of gore that was just outside the convenience store. But yeah, that's what I saw, and it still really sticks with me and disturbs me. What if I went out that night instead? So this is my first time talking about this, but it's still something that I want to get off my chest. So some backstory first. I come from a middle class or upper middle class family. I have super wealthy grandparents on both sides. I've always lived on this massive farm. I'm very used to the outdoors, and I've never had a fear of the dark or the outdoors at all. But anyways, when I was 14 years old, I was living in rural Appalachia in a super low income area. We had a medium-sized farm, and we were having to go to Florida most summers to help on the family farm down there as well. And this particular year that I'm talking about was no different. We still had to go to Florida to work in the Florida sun, and if you've ever been there, you know what that can be like. So one day, my sister says, "Hey, let's go fishing in the old mines." She called me some nickname we have for each other, but I'll leave that out. I think nothing of this because it's usual horse trails and stuff. It's nothing out of the ordinary, so I agree. Now, while hiking out into the swamp, things begin to get a little weird. I keep seeing glimpses at this field that just seems kind of wrong. We set up at some old mine holes that are filled with water and start fishing. After a few hours, I have to piss, so I go out to do that just a little bit of a distance away, and I see that field again, off in the distance. I say screw it, I'm gonna go check it out. This was my mistake. I walk towards the field and I pass through a bush into this place that absolutely did not belong there. From wet marshy ground to solid dirt and alfalfa grass. It's in the hot summer sun, but The sun seems distant. I feel cool, and there's a comfortable breeze. I wander around thinking that this has never been here before, or I would have seen it while riding. And then I see the spot that would become the home of my recurring nightmares. It was a small woodlog fence surrounding a worn-down shed. There was no door, and you couldn't see inside. The dirt on the other side of the fence was beat down and dry, like it was trampled by rowdy horses all day and night for years. I'm dumb and think that I have to explore the shed. I approach. As I start to climb the fence, I feel a hand that's on my shoulder. The hand was all wrong, very not human. And then a voice said, "Do not enter there. This is not a place for you." I was freaking out because I didn't know who or what is touching me, and how did it sneak up on me in the open field like this. I immediately stop and get off the fence. I turn toward it and start to freak out even more. What I'm looking at in front of me is a nearly 10-foot tall human with all the wrong features. A triangular crown-like head with two wide oval-shaped eyes that looked like a picture of the stars with tiny greenish retinas. It has small, ill-proportioned slits in what appears to be a nasal bridge, and a wide mouth with almost a flap for lips that interlocked over it. The thing opens its maw again and says, "Go now, and return to where you're supposed to be." Its long, lanky arm pulls away from my shoulder and points back along the path of the grass that I stepped on to get here. Its hand is all wrong, like it has 4 digits, 2 pointed of the forward section, like our pointer and index finger, but then 2 long thumb-like things posted opposite each other. I immediately start running to the woods at the edge. I look back as I'm halfway there, and it's gone. The fields are wavering like a mirage. As soon as my foot lands in the muck of the swamp, I get blasted by the musty heat of the swampland again. I turn around, and it's gone. There's no field, and I seemingly just came out of the marshy edge of a pool of swamp water. I hear my sister calling for me. She sounds very upset. I holler back, "I'm right here, just taking a leak." I make my way back, and she says that I've been gone an hour. Where the hell have I been? I tell her about the field and the thing that I saw. She turns very serious and says in the most serious tone I've ever heard from her, "Never speak about the elf again. It's going to follow you now." Me and my sister were constantly screwing with each other, so I thought that she was just messing with me here too. At home, I ask my mom about the field and such when we go through my grandparents' mudroom. The reply I got from her and my grandmother set this into an actual nightmare ever since. "You should have never crossed the line to their homes. Never do it again. They aren't nice enough to let you go twice. Now you'll see them, and they will see you." I actually cry because I'm so shocked. My mom tells me to just go play GameCube in the living room. My dad picked me up, and we drove back home. Something happened to me when I went hiking in Colorado. I was there alone because none of my friends wanted to come. They just wanted to stay in the cabin, get drunk, and watch anime. In case you're curious, on me I had a 9mm and my trusty Molson, and a full kit, including a single tent and a thin sleeping bag. I actually had a very good pace going. Eventually, though, the sun begins to decline. I find a nice little camping area in this little grove of trees, with a spot of sky still showing through. There's mushrooms and rocks littered about. There's no signs of really anybody ever being there. It smells earthy and nice. I build a little campfire, just enough to cook some food. I start unpacking my tent when I hear something in the woods. It was very, very soft, but it sounded like staying. I look around. It's nothing but the sounds of bugs and birds. I shrug it off. I put up my trusty one-man tent, and then I pull out a can of beef stew. I set it next to the fire with some holes in the top. I sit on my rock and pull out a book. I was just enjoying the woods. And then I hear something shush again. I lift my head to hear it better. I hear reading, just as soft this time, very hushy, very mysterious. The hair on my arms and neck begin to stand up. Then I hear it again. It says, "Afraid?" It came from the woods. It almost hissed out like something in there knew that I was very unsettled. My gut was churning and bubbling. My legs were jittery. My brain is screaming out that whatever this is, I don't want to be near it. I slowly stand up. I think, I have more than one pack. I pull up my Mosin. My tent is old. I think, I need a new one anyways. I turn, working the action of my slide to chamber around. The fire is small and ringed by rocks. It won't spread. That voice erupts from the woods in a harsh leaving that's not even trying to conceal itself anymore. I turn and bolt, tearing my ass down the trail. Something is crashing through my tent after me, howling in rage. It's 3 miles to my truck. I'm not stopping. I'm sprinting down this trail, rolling over rocks that are in the way, hurdling shrubs, just a mad sprint for safety. A mile down the trail, it catches up to me. I hear it land with a thump, a few meters to my right, having jumped down from somewhere. I draw out my gun while running. My Mosin is in my left hand. I turn and see this huge thing battering away a bush. It's absolutely grotesque looking. It was extremely furry, with a large white star on its belly. It had these weird cloven feet, and it had a short, stubby little horn-type thing on its head, almost like a young deer's. I yell out a challenge and started blasting away at it, my little 9mm rounds streaking through the air. I see 3 rounds impact, one right on its chest, one in the belly, and one just skims its ribcage. It doesn't stop. It's just pissed. It roars again, but it's stopping doing this allows me to regain the little lead that I had. I was thoroughly freaked out. Panic was setting in. My legs were pumping. Mosin in one hand, pistol in the other, just thundering down this trail. Finally, I see the parking lot. The only truck there is mine. The sun is setting, giving more shadows than I would like. It's catching up again. I'm thinking, holy hell, it's fast. It's within eyesight, blowing through obstacles like nothing. It screeches out, leaving. I twist to my left, my Mosin out in a one-handed hold. I shoot without looking. The 54R finds purchase somewhere in the leg, and it tumbles. I've pretty much shit myself. I think I might have urine or sweat running down my legs. I don't know. My body is trying to shed weight like crazy. I slam into my truck door, open it with panicked and shaky hands. My truck turns on, and I squeal out of the parking lot. I finally make it back to cabin. I'm covered in sweat and Lord knows what else. The other guys are there. They ask me if I'm okay. I say nothing to them. I just immediately go to the bathroom for a shower. They're all drunk, so they don't really notice how shaken I am. After that, I just go to bed, and I never told them what I experienced out there in the woods. Way back when I was 13 or 14 years old, I don't quite remember which, I got my first 30-30 handed down to me from my grandpa. My grandpa then decided that he wanted to take me into the woods for a 2-night camping trip. We hiked out onto this ridge and followed it all the way up to the top of this pretty big mountain that's near my town. We hit the top of the mountain after about maybe 4 hours of hiking. We found a nice spot and decided to make camp for the night. Gramps is always constantly scanning and backpedaling on the trail, looking behind me. We set up camp and cook some beans and bacon. Gramps takes little walks around the area that the fire lights up. He would shush me every now and then and tell me to go to sleep. We wake up the next morning and start packing stuff. And I notice that as I'm packing, that it's oddly quiet. The area isn't as, I guess, alive as it was the night before. My grandpa tells me that we're cutting the trip short because he doesn't feel good. I say okay, completely oblivious to what he may have been doing. On the hike back down the ridge, I notice that everything is different. I ask Gramps, and he says that we are going a different way. I ask why, and he says not to worry, that it's safer this way. I ask him what he means, why is it safer, but he doesn't really give me a straight answer. So 4 hours later, we hit the bottom of a canyon and we take a break for lunch. Gramps is focused heavily on the rear of where we just walked. For lunch, I ate like 3 granola bars and had a can of soda. Gramps didn't really eat anything and hasn't drank anything the entire way back. I noticed too that where we are starts getting really quiet. It was like a slow fade out, like somebody was turning off a volume knob. I noticed that we are in a very dense pine area. There's no birds chirping or squirrels running around. There's nothing. Me and Gramps start moving through heavily wooded areas, but this time he tells me to get my rifle off my back and put a few shells in it. He has his old school 6-shooter out with his rifle on a sling. He tells me to head north. I start brush busting and not looking behind me to make sure that Gramps is there. I hear him shout from my 2 o'clock, and I freeze in fear because it sounded like help. I start making my way toward the shout. The trees are getting closer and closer together. It's getting harder to see where I'm going. I hear more shouting, but it seems to be getting closer. This starts to sound odd. It sounds like it's him telling me to go to sleep. The first thing that pops into my head is the movie Predator, when it repeats everybody's phrases and everything everybody says. I shout out our code word if you ever get lost. I get a return of help, sleep. I feel a hand grab me, and out of panic, I rifle off a shot. Gramps grabs my backpack and starts dragging me out of the wooded area. At this point, I'm crying and being ashamed of shooting on accident. He tells me not to cry, that it will only make it worse. And then I hear my own crying 40 yards off to the 9 o'clock of us when we stop. Gramps looks at me and then says, "See what happens when they hear you being weak." The sun starts to go down, so we find a nice open area to make camp, so we aren't fumbling through the woods. I have one of those 1,000,000 candlelight hand spotlights, and I bust it out just in case. I planned on killing coyotes that night. I hear howling, but not from a coyote, and there are no wolves in my state. Grandpa is still clutching his handgun, scanning the tree line. I hear something scrape down a tree, like claws hitting bark. I turn on the spotlight on the thing, and I see one of them, and shine back of at least 4 sets of eyes. Gramps cracks a pistol round off, and we hear help, sleep, as shit is going wild on that side of the forest. Gramps says to let it loose, and I start working the lever like I'm John Wayne. I run out of ammo before Gramps, and he is still pacing his shots. I hear rustling on all sides of the forest. Gramps tells me to get my rifle ready, as he starts putting what little firewood we had and making a semicircle with it around us. He tells me to pull up all the shrubs and put them on the wood. He leaves a 5-foot wide opening in the circle and tells me that it's our way out. He then lights the semicircle on fire, and it's pretty bright for the first 30 minutes. The circle starts to dim down, and that's when you could see something, pacing just far enough for eyes to register the shape. The spotlight is dead because I left it on when I set it down. I start crying again, and Gramps tells me to man up. They like it when you are weak. Day breaks. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have passed out at some point. I get woken up to Gramps shooting in the air, and once again, I panic and rifle a shot off into the woods. We pack up and start hiking out of the canyon that we ended up in. Gramps tells me that I did good and not to tell my mom what happened. Gramps was a World War II vet and an overall very hard dude. He tells me that what happened is when you're afraid of the dark and they smell it. I had a ringing in my ears for a couple of days afterwards. He tells me not to go back into that area unless I have some, quote, help when you go camping. And I have this one other story of my grandfather from years before this. When I was around 10 or so, I was with my grandfather and cousin. We were patrolling the ranch that was pretty close to the area where all this other spooky stuff went down. So like I said, me and my cousin were 10, or thereabouts. It was about 3 hours into patrolling the ranch. We were making sure that there were no squatters out there in any of the buildings. We end up crossing a dry riverbed. Gramps disappears into the brush, leaving me and my cousin alone in this riverbed. We spend a few minutes throwing rocks at stuff and end up throwing them at each other. We hear something up across the riverbed, which was about 40 feet long. It sounded like a coyote, just louder. We shrug it off and start throwing rocks in that direction, thinking that it was a coyote trying to lure us out there. The howling goes away for a few minutes. We continue with the waterhead type of activities that we were doing prior, and then we hear the same howling noise again. We look up. We see a man in the brush, staring at us, but barely visible. He has long black hair and very dark skin. He has no shirt and what looked like a cowhide skirt. The howling and screaming gets a lot louder. Me and my cousin begin to cry that we're so afraid, and then all of a sudden, the noise and the man are just randomly not to be seen, like they just vanished. We then get to the other side of the creek bed and sit there with our sticks that looked like guns, thinking they were going to protect us, ready to fight it out. The same man is there down in the riverbed now, about 100 yards away, but fully visible. We take aim with the sticks, and my cousin makes a shooting noise. The man looks directly on us. We both freeze. We hear what sounded like a landslide to the hill behind us. We turn around. It's Gramps, sliding down what was essentially a cliff on his ass, yelling, "Look at the ground, look at your feet." He grabs us by our arms and drags us back to the truck while saying, "Look at the ground," the entire time. He gets us to the truck and says that we were very lucky and all this stuff. My cousin was so afraid that his bladder let go, and if we didn't get out of there, I wasn't going to be far behind him. Before my grandpa died, I tried to ask him about what happened when I was with him at the ranch, and I don't know, I guess I just never found a really opportune time to bring it up to him. So those encounters were bizarre, strange, and downright terrifying. If there was one of them in particular that stuck out to you, let me know which one it was down in the comments. If you have one of your own, I have an email in the description below that you can send it to if you'd like to. Also down there are links to a PayPal and a Patreon if you would like to support the channel that way. And here on YouTube, there's super thanks and memberships. But as always, just watching the video, commenting, favoriting, sharing, and all that great stuff really helps the channel grow. It also helps YouTube know that you like my videos and like this kind of stuff that I'm doing. And with all of that, I hope you'll have a good week. I hope you will enjoy the videos this week, including this one. So with that, I hope to see you Friday, and then Sunday, and then we start her all over again. And yeah, I'll let you go until then. I hope you have a good week, and I'll see you Friday. Thank you for pulling up a stump. Thank you for watching.